Hello and welcome back to the IceMac MMA podcast. We skipped a week last week. We're back now, and we're going to talk about all the fights that happened a couple weeks ago, some big news that's changing the MMA landscape, a really good fight night card coming up. But before we get into any of that, make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, share us, comment about it, anything you can do to interact with it, anything you want to do to interact with it. It helps us out a ton, doesn't cost you anything. Alex, how you doing, buddy?
I'm pretty good, man. It was a nice little Thanksgiving break that we had going on for
Very
sure.
nice for you.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys are seeing right here, but we got I showed Jackson as soon as we got on the call, but I mean, like, I'm gonna be such a douche right now. And
Bad, great weekend for your football team,
oh,
horrible weekend for your liver.
oh my God, so bad. I can't repeat the story that I took that I was talking to you about earlier today. I'll tell you what though, my parents were disappointed, and and if you celebrate Blackout Wednesday, you know how it goes sometimes. So we'll just leave it at that. Poor decisions were made. We regretted them, but we're back here. I'm stoked, man. I'm
Oh,
stoked.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and there's no more perfect Thanksgiving than your parents being a little dissatisfied at your actions. All right, but speaking of bad decisions, I want to talk a little bit about the UFC in relation to our big piece of news that happened about a week ago now, but we didn't have the chance to talk about. I think the UFC has made an awful decision because this super merger between PFL and Bellator is going to have a few key components that I think are going to make them very, very big and very, very problematic within the MMA sphere as far as UFC being clear and cut number one. For one, not really an MMA thing. I understand that Jake Paul does get eyes. I want to get that out of the way because I don't want to spend too much time on it. He's in association with it. It's a moneymaker regardless. The big one, the obvious one, Francis Ngannou. He's the
Yeah.
head of this charge. He's going to be the face of this merger. And I think that these combined powers and these combined rosters are going to be excellent for the MMA community.
Yeah, in terms of talent, and you think about this merger and how there's going to be more they're just going to be more financially flexible as well to a pay structure that is arguably already better than what the UFC's got going on. So you acquire all the Bellator talent, and you also acquire the money that they bring in. And I mean, those two combined certainly don't generate the revenue that the UFC does, but when you think about how it'll affect the fighters fighting in that promotion, they are probably going to be set up, especially the kind of entry level ones that we've had several discussions about across across months. But I think you're going to start seeing a lot more UFC talent migrate over because of the pay structure that they currently have in place for their fighters, and I can only imagine it improves.
Oh, absolutely. And to draw a comparison in similar, actually involving some of the same people, believe it or not, I personally, I am a professional wrestling fan. This merger reminds me a lot. What PFL and Bellator is going to be able to create is something called AEW, which, if for the unfamiliar, is this new or wrestling company founded by the owners of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they came in with a lot of money and the ability to get into a big time slot. PFL has that with ESPN. And they managed to, in relatively short order, pick up a lot of fans and attract premier talent from WWE, owned by TKO, over and bring a lot of those fans over. And it can be this really quick influx of, oh, this is new, this is exciting, this has a lot of people that I know, I'm going to check this out. And we've actively seen it in a marketplace that has, like I said, very similar people involved, and it does lead to maybe not sustainability, but if you can get to the top quick, PFL could really take a foothold on MMA and, like you said, draw some of those guys. Like, for example, let's say Dustin Poirier never wins the UFC title. He gets a couple more fights along, his deal's up. The UFC sees him more as an attraction guy, somebody they'll bring in every now and again, once a year to have a fight. PFL wants to push him as a potential champion, get him in there a bunch of times, have him in the Grand Prix, have him in the, the $1 million tournaments. And they're offering better wages, or at least competitive. And all of a sudden we've got a viable marketplace. It's not just the UFC.
Yeah, and that's the next thing I was going to talk about is I kind of hope that this helps force Dana's hand a little bit, and the fact that he needs to really look at himself, because he's Dana, for as long as we've done this podcast, for sure, is, in his eyes, God's gift to MMA.
Yeah.
He can do no wrong. And clearly, like we've brought up on multiple occasions, we have a lot of issues with how he goes about things, with his business with the UFC. But it's at the same time, I also like that there is, a premier MMA promotion, and I'd like for it to stay that way. But I think it's also good if you get that PFL, that new PFL kind of challenging that, for them to reassert themselves as that, but in a more fair manner to the fighters in the promotion. And you touched on it briefly, about PFL being on ESPN. That's going to be super interesting to monitor, with how PFL maybe goes to pay-per-views. I know PFL is on Fridays and UFC's on Saturdays, so it's, you can kind of compare and contrast those numbers and see how they shift in the next couple months, especially. I think that's going to be really, really interesting to see.
So my big question, do we know how much longer the UFC on ESPN deal is?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure.
All right, so let's see. I just Googled it. So Ministry of Sport is reporting they extended it this year, 7 years, approximately $300 million. So in theory, over the next 7 years, we will get to see a war to grab MMA fans' attentions, not only in the same marketplace, on very, very close nights, on the same channel. And that, I don't know that that's ever happened, and I would struggle to believe that. I mean, other than maybe like with sitcoms, like a couple sitcoms being on the same market and trying to be number one or whatever in the peak of all that. But as far as like actual combat, I think it's not too outlandish to say that Power Slap was probably the second most well-known combat weekly thing that you get. I think more people could have told you about Dana White's Power Slap than they could have about PFL or Bellator before this deal, common people on the street. Now, you've got to believe there's going to be a real big market push to make sure everybody and their mother knows what PFL is. And seeing how they capitalize on that with all this new talent, that's the most fascinating part to me.
Well, and also because PFL is, from what I understand, there are no PFL pay-per-views.
Yes.
It's solely, the ESPN Plus subscription or whatever, which is, obviously pales in comparison to paying the $85, I think it is nowadays, for a UFC pay-per-view.
So I think they just request you take out a mortgage every month.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. But the point that I was trying to make, though, is that, like, people like free shit. And if you're on a Friday night, we're in the time of year now during football season where they're not really playing football on Fridays. Saturdays is there's football all day. Obviously, we're getting to the end of college football season, so that'll, kind of go away. But you think, especially around this time of year, these last, 3 months that we've had, the majority of the population isn't going to be watching the UFC when you have a game between, for my sake, Texas and Michigan next year.
Yeah.
If they're playing in prime time, like, the people are going to watch that over UFC. But on a Friday night in the middle of September, especially, like, some people are just going to be like, what the hell? Like, nothing, no other sports are on. Let's watch PFL. That's how I feel about some if there's just something random on television when it's a slow day, like I'm totally the type of person to just like find whatever sports on and just tune in.
Dude, the amount of SEC network documentaries we've secondhand watched in
Yeah.
the office you're currently sitting in preaches that point. But think there's a very real possibility within the next couple months that that okay, never mind. Let's talk about this time next year, football season next year. There's a decent enough chance with weak fight night cards that PFL gets better numbers because of what you're saying with the oh wait, there's a football game on. I'll rewatch the UFC thing tomorrow or whatever. I'll put it off and watch this football game. PFL's on Friday, going up against Toledo versus Akron. And it's like,
Hey,
oh,
Action's on Tuesdays. Don't
my
disrespect.
my bad. They do what is it, AAC that they throw out there on Friday nights?
God, it depends. There have been a couple power conference games that have been on Fridays though. Like, obviously not multiple, but like one.
Yeah.
Early in the season, I can't imagine. I imagine it'll be smaller FBS schools, but
Yeah, but I
yes.
mean, people like you said, flipping through there, being like, "Oh wait, this is on. I'll check it out." And then on Saturday, football, you don't change the channel. You set the remote at 12 p.m. and then you put it down for the rest of the day. Um, there's a good chance we could see the UFC having to promote PFL during one of their things, be it a commercial, be it a whatever, you know, every chance in the world, the word PFL or the initials PFL come across their screen while you're watching a UFC fight night card, a direct competitor, encouraging people to go check out that competitor. Such a wild agreement. I'm kind of shocked they didn't absorb into the Bellator thing to maybe sneak out of that because I can't believe I struggle to believe the UFC's cool with what's happening right now. Um, Maybe the PFL gets put out of their contract and they go find somewhere else. But either way, I think this could have some very, very big factors within how we see MMA currently.
Yeah, and you just the last point I'll make before we move on is just you think about the actual kind of saturation of talent now within the PFL. Um, does it doesn't, it's not at the level of the UFC, but it's getting damn close. Like
Mm-hmm.
is with guys like Ngannou. Obviously, Usman or Magomedov is suspended, but that is a guy who I've gone on record saying I think will be a UFC champion. Obviously, he's popped for drugs, but like there are guys in each promotion that could challenge and win and beat current UFC champions right now, and that I think is what's going to be scary as well for the UFC.
Dude, drop Brennan Loughnane over there into the featherweight division. I mean, he takes a lot of important skulls.
Yeah,
He makes a statement on that company. And you're going to quickly find out who Brendan Loughnane is whenever you check in on Fridays on ESPN. And that brand is going to get valuable. And you've already got guys that people know the name of. So I'm right there with you. We can move on, but I think it's going to be a very big deal, a lot bigger than a lot of people I think are registering right now.
yeah. So exciting stuff. I mean, it's good for us. It gives us something to talk about. It'll. Yeah, I think I'll hand up on this. I think we've been slacking a little bit on covering the last couple of PFL and Bellator cards.
Yeah.
Um, we're busy. It's the end of football season. We've been over this several times. Like this time of year for us especially is just a lot. But I mean, now it's undeniable. Like Friday nights are must watch television from here on out. Now that this deal is done.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and that thing I was talking about earlier about you don't change the channel until Sunday morning, that was quite literally me this weekend. I had to go back and rewatch this card, the next morning, but it's a good thing I did because Brendan Allen, massive, massive dude. I cannot believe he subbed Paul Craig, man. That shouldn't be a sentence that it is real and holds fact to it.
Well, I think that's kind of that's the double-edged sword with Paul Craig is like he's so effective on the ground, but his aggressiveness, especially in guard, uh, can come back to bite him against a guy who's as good as Brendan Allen is. And I mean, I think we both picked him. I picked him. You picked him. Like we had a feeling this would happen, but still somehow it feels that much more impressive that he was able to get it done that quickly.
Well, yeah, because we went into it just being like, yeah, this is what we expect him to do. But to see it actually happen, it's like, okay. It's just like, okay, that's what I thought should play out in my head, but he still did it against a guy as impressive as Paul Craig is. And you just go, maybe just maybe this kid is actually, cut out for this. Maybe he's actually going to be a possible champion in the future or a top 5 guy. And obviously I'm feeling pretty good because he was in
Yeah.
my rising stars. The rest of this though, I didn't feel as great. I know the next one had a win, but still sad that we didn't get a knockout there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's I don't know. I don't know what to think of that because, Jake Matthews is by no means a cream of the crop, but like, he's still going to be a tough out for anyone. You just like to see someone with an undefeated record going up against another guy who's just kind of, you know, up and down his way through the UFC. Like you'd like to see something a little more definitive than that. But at the end of the day, he's 16-0. Like I, you know, what how much can you nitpick about that?
You really can't. And it's not all of them can be perfect, and sometimes you do just have to get gritty and survive. And that's what we got. I'm happy enough with the outcome because we're going to see more impressive performances. Odds are we'll see worse performances from
Morales.
Morales. Okay. The I just can't pronounce names, but we're going to see a little bit better and a little bit worse on both sides. The important thing is he got out of there with the win. That's really all he needed, and that's all he got. So it didn't really change my view on him any. I will say I have to buy in a little bit more on Chase Hooper now. Um, I really didn't think it was going to work at lightweight because he was losing a lot of. He still has plenty of reach, but he was losing a little bit of it. He was losing some of that power advantage. He came out there and looked very good against a guy that, while I don't think he's great, I do think he's serviceable.
He is serviceable, but that was my whole point was if you lose to Paddy Pimblett the way Jordan Levitt did, he just can't be that good. And I don't want to take anything away from Chase Hooper because he looked awesome. A first round sub. Again, and Levitt's a good wrestler.
Yeah.
I like this move to lightweight. I think there's some traction here for Chase Hooper. Like it might just be that he was so depleted at 145 that those, last couple losses he had were just because he didn't have the fortitude in his body. Just did he couldn't it didn't work.
No.
But I was very encouraged by that fight for Chase Hooper long term.
So one thing I take away from what you just said, don't get me wrong, I don't think Paddy is a world champion by any stretch, but he's not bad. Like I understand he had a bad performance against Jared Gordon, but he has built up some kind of believability for Dana White of all people to have faith in him. He's got this flash, he's got this ability to kind of get in your head a little bit. So I didn't take too much away from the Bellator thing because I do think Paddy is comfortably better than him, but I also think Paddy would have comfortably been better than Chase. I don't know that I can say that anymore because Chase does look like he could be a good to very good to great kind of fighter at lightweight. And all the credit in the world. I'm glad he made the switch because it's always better to see guys get to the closest version of the best version of themselves.
I hate to keep talking about him, but I'm curious. What do you think Patty's ceiling is as a fighter?
I could see him being whatever Till was after people thought he could be a world champ. So somewhere in that 8 to 15, fun to put up on the podium and rile up a guy that you think is impressive or whatever. won't ever be a world champion, might not ever get a belt fight, but enough to sell a couple tickets, to be third on the booking order on a pay-per-view, or maybe fourth, that non-title fight attraction guy, that will bring fans in to watch, but not necessarily be the reason they stick around.
So we're actually kind of in agreement on that. I think you still think he'll probably be a little better than I do. I see him being ranked. I don't see him as high as like 7 or 8.
Okay.
But like, 10 through 15, I could see that happening because he's pretty good. He's pretty good all around. I just don't think he's great all around. Certainly after that Jared Gordon fight. But
He needs
that
to dip back in. He needs to dip back into his ground game. If he
yeah,
wants to actually be what I said, the 7 to 8 region, maybe even try to go higher, he needs to stop trying to stand and bang with everybody, because his base is ground. He's going to get clipped because he hangs his jaw out there and wiggles it at him. Like he in theory, and what I've seen from him pre UFC, is a capable guy of being a seven or lower. But yeah, I don't think he's a champion.
yeah. But I didn't want to dwell on that. But
Of course.
it was something I was wondering. I was curious about that. But
How dare you branch off into a different conversation on a podcast, Alex? How dare you?
oh my God, yeah, we never do that, right? But
How many times we've
this
had to
next
say,
fight,
yeah, you got
let's get to the next fight
yeah,
because I want to talk about it. This
yeah.
was one of the best women's MMA fights I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. The what sucks is I
On
still think,
God, that was awesome.
dude, and I still think Luana's going to get knocked down for it. Like, I still don't know that she's going to get put in that many value fights after this.
Dude, that was like first you got to give props to both of them because like in the beginning, Luana looked like that was some world champion caliber striking, and Ribas was wearing it
Yeah.
big time. She
Yeah.
was wearing it. Like I thought it was wraps. I thought it was so over so early. But I mean, the biggest takeaway for me is just like Luana Pinheiro needs to work on her cardio. And if she can get it to where, a 15-minute fight like that, she doesn't gas out and get finished in the third round, she could be a serious problem for the strawweight division. And obviously, Ribas showed so much heart. With her though, the thing is you know what she is. Like she's never gonna be that sort of world champion caliber fighter. But one, she's gonna give you complete hell. Two, her defense still non-existent. But in three, if it gets to the ground, you're in trouble. Those are the three things that you need to know about Amanda Ribas. And like I just feel like this sets her up for those kind of fun just banger fights. Like I'd like to see her face like Jessica Andrade in particular after she picked up that big win. It feels like Pinheiro is probably more talented, but the conditioning wise, she got completely outclassed.
She needs to be less Paolo and be more Vittori. She
Yeah,
needs to go sit on the bike. She needs to go catch up with Goggins, with Ferguson. Go train with David Goggins, go through that course, and then come back. Because I really do, I say Vittori. I think she could be the Vittori of her class. Maybe not a champion. She did, like you said, she did look great on the feet, but maybe not a champion, but just right there on the precipice where it's like if they gave her a title shot, everybody would be like, that's fine. You know what I mean? I think she could be that level. But yeah, to lose after having that much dominance early is why I'm worried about her not getting very many value fights, because I do think Dana will see value in her. I just don't know that he's going to replicate that. And what I mean by value fights, basically women's fights that don't get buried on prelims, fights where people are actually watching. That's what I mean by that. And I think she'll probably have to step into those early pre's on pay-per-views, normal prelims on fight night cards for a little bit, work on that gas tank, build herself back up. But I'm right there with you. I think she could really take a big step forward in 2-3 years.
Yeah, but that does it for our 4 predictions from 2 weeks ago. And
Yes.
now we get to another pretty solid fight night to kick off December. I mean,
A
we're
very solid
picking
fight
we're
night.
picking the entire main card, right?
Yep. Yep. Picking the entire main card. And then we have a couple shout outs as well from the prelims. Not really fights that felt like they're going to do much to change things in the UFC moving forward, but Misha Tate, Clay Guida, both legends of the sport, both worth mentioning anytime they're on a fight card, just because if you want to see a piece of MMA history, a piece of UFC history, just check out their fights because they did mean a lot to the company at a certain point in time. We open up with two names that I'm going to struggle with, but I am going to shorten the first name for Puna Soriano and then Dustin Stoltzfus. That name gives me
Yeah.
fits. There's too many L's and T's and Z's mixed in all at once, and my mouth hates it. But regardless, kind of a fight between two dudes that are not performing up to expectation in the company.
Yeah, I know Stoltzfus he previously was like kind of on the chopping block, but from what I remember, he had a big win in his last fight, I want to say.
It was his previous. So he in his last five, he's 1-4.
Okay, yeah.
So he just got off of a TKO loss to Abus Magomedov.
I'm seeing that right now. So
Yes.
yeah, he was on the chopping block after losing 3 straight. Losing to Gerald Meerschaert certainly isn't a recipe for success, but
Well,
he
and
got that one
Adakis.
back.
Yeah,
And
he
again,
lost to Adakis.
yeah, he did lose to a Dawkins. He did lose to a Dawkins. That is so tough. The
At least,
human punching bags.
thank God he didn't get chinned, I guess.
Um, but yeah, listen, Magomedov is like he's he is I think he got elevated a little too quickly, but we've talked about this before. He's a pretty good fighter. Um, I will say I've seen considerably more of Puna Soriano. Um, and maybe that is influencing my pick here, but I think Puna is the more talented of the two. I remember watching Dustin's fight against Dwight Grant, and I remember him looking pretty good. But still, it's going to be hard for me to go against Puna here.
I'm right there with you. I think it's Puna, but I think I lean more into his durability. I think he's a little bit more capable of looking better after 15 minutes than Dustin might be. And ultimately, whenever you have two guys that are kind of similar skill levels, at least right now, I lean as to who I think is going to look better at the start of round 3, and that's Puna.
Yes, 100%.
All right, so the next fight is, I think, it's going to be one of the more fun ones. I'm also very curious about how Sean Brady looks because, I'm still getting flashbacks to that Bilal Muhammad fight. It's probably not going to go very much easier for him because he's going up against Kelvin Gastelum. Alex, how do you see this one?
Kelvin Gastelum, if you've watched him before, you know he is one of the toughest son of a bitches in the entire promotion. That guy is a tough out. I don't know if has he ever been finished?
I think he's been subbed, right?
I don't know. I am not sure that Kelvin Gastelum has been
2 submissions, never been knocked out.
2 submission. Okay, never been knocked out. So okay, that is a little concerning against a guy like Sean Brady for sure.
Yes.
However, both of those submissions came at middleweight, where objectively, let's just call a spade a spade. He was fat.
Yeah.
Can we do that? Can
Yeah,
we
we
do that?
could. I feel like we could probably do that. I think
Um, huh?
he'd say that, wouldn't he?
Yeah,
I think he'd agree.
yeah. But now he's fighting at welterweight. I'm not super worried about the weight cut affecting him at all because it's not like he's cutting, it's not like he's losing a ton of water weight. A lot of it is just fat. A lot of it is going to be fat off his body. So it's not going to affect his durability or his gas tank or anything like that in this fight to me. And I think he wins it. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think Kelvin wins this fight. I don't think I don't think you can get knocked out by Bilal Muhammad, pillow hands Bilal Muhammad, and be successful in the welterweight division, especially against a guy who just is relentless like Kelvin Gastelum.
I
So
so I am picking Sean, but it is against my better judgment because for the most part, I absolutely recognize you do not get into a firefight with Kelvin Gastelum, especially if your chin gave way to Bilal like it did. Also, we have a history of being a little freaked out after dudes get knocked out because a lot of times it means that chin is going to be a little bit more susceptible to that. What I will say though, Brady is capable of latching on and just not letting go. And that's what he's going to have to do against Kelvin. He's in. I don't know if there's ever going to be fully gas Kelvin Gastelum. I don't know if that exists, but if Sean can get him there and at least try his damnedest to get as much gas as he can out of that tank, maybe in the third round you can risk standing a little bit. But overall, I think if Brady's going to win, it's going to have to be in the mud. It's going to have to be on the mat. And I do think he's capable of that. He's fight younger. He can finish it both ways. He can get a ground and pound he's not going to ground and pound KG. Don't get me wrong. KG's chin is not going anywhere, but he is capable of having that, and he's got that gas tank. So it just makes more sense in my head for Brady to win. But that being said, my gut is also telling me Gastelum, and a lot of times whenever those two messages conflict, I pick the wrong one. So that could be a very simple win for you here, and wouldn't shock me at all. But I am going to lean Sean Brady for this one.
yeah, the grappling does it concerns me a little bit, as it should with a guy like Sean Brady, but um Calvin's gone up against guys 15 pounds heavier than this, essentially his whole career. And I think it'll be surprisingly easier for him to deal with a guy trying to wrestle him who's simply not as big. And that's kind of that's where I'm coming from with this fight. But yeah, I don't feel awesome about going against Sean Brady just because of his talent, but at the same time, it's just God, Kelvin's so tough. Like I would feel worse going against him than I do going against Sean Brady right now.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And one thing to consider, maybe KG does lose a little bit of his center of gravity because he is going to have to tighten things up to get skinnier to get into that weight. That could cause him some problems because he's not going to have as much, pounds to throw around there and get out of that kind of stuff. And Brady is going to be a lot more accurate than I think a lot of the dudes he fought throughout his career were. So just a couple key components to keep in mind, but definitely a toss up of a fight. This next one, not so much. Not for me, at least.
This one is fascinating to me because Rob, I feel like people don't give Rob Font enough credit.
No, and I'm probably one of them. I think he's kind of the perfect gatekeeper for the bantamweight five.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm going to be hypocritical here because I think Davison does win this fight. But like Rob Font does not get enough credit. That dude, that's another guy that is such a tough out. And I don't think this will be a finish on Davison's side. I think he's going to be tested for 15 minutes, but at the same time, I'm super encouraged by him finally making the jump up to bantamweight because you could see the toll that he was taking on him continuing. He looked fake. When he was
Yes.
cutting to 125, he literally did not look like a real human being.
He looked like those things you see at the doctor's office where it shows you
Yeah.
how blood moves through your body.
Yeah.
Like you could see his blood, his veins trying to pump through to the rest of him. So the thing about this fight, can we talk about how disrespectful it is that it is number 3 on this card?
Yeah. What the hell?
You're telling me Jalen Turner and Bobby Green get seniority over Rob Font and Figgy? Come on. I think this, call me crazy, this should be the main event.
You're not wrong, honestly. But it's because you know why? You know why it is?
Mhm.
because Figgy competed as a flyweight.
Yeah,
That's
dude, the
why.
curse of the flyweights. It's
And because there's no problem having a bantamweight main event,
no,
but because Figgy is the former flyweight champ, I swear that's why. It's
yes.
just because Figgy was the champ at flyweight.
Dana's like, you think people are going to sit here and watch a man that weighs 120 pounds as their main event? No, we'll throw him at 3. Like ridiculous mindset. But regardless, um, I think Figgy could be a possible champion at bantamweight, but I don't want to lock into that because I need to see his hands while he's a weight class up before. I need to see how he reacts from more power coming at him, more power in him. But I do think that Rob is going to be the perfect litmus test for what Davison can achieve in this division. I think he goes to a decision. I think he gets the win over Font. And that kind of sets him up as maybe he takes on Marab next because God knows they're not going to give Marab a title shot. They've got too much other possibilities with money and less important fighters in this division. Shout out Cheeto Vera, but it's this could be a situation where you could put Davison versus Font, then Davison versus Marab for a title shot, and I think that that's the path we're about to be headed on because I think we're going to get a banger for 1, but for 2, a very long fight that shows that Fiki is capable of this move.
Yeah, it will be a banger for sure. And I think, you know, I don't know if I'm as sold on Figgy's title potential at bantamweight as you are. One, because it's just so deep.
Yeah,
There are so many good bantamweight fighters. And two, Figgy is going to be at a size disadvantage at this weight class. Like he's not tall enough. And I want to say Henry Cejudo is the outlier. Um, I don't think Figgy is at the same caliber of fighter as Henry Cejudo is. But
no,
even we saw Henry lose to Aljo in a title fight. Um, and so I think that's working against him. I believe he'll get a title shot. I believe he's good enough to do that. I just don't know that if at 135 he'll have the sheer like the intangibles to become champ, you know?
it is worth noting that Figgy becoming a champion, even in my head, does rely on some weird stuff happening, like Cheeto beating Sean and then Figgy getting that shot or something goofy. Because I do think he loses to Marab, Sandy, Sean, Cejudo. But those, that's pretty elite. I think those 4 guys beat just about anybody else in that weight class on this earth. So, take that as you want. But I think he comes out here and does kind of establish that maybe the size isn't too much to overcome for him. It might just be an age and talent thing at this point.
Yeah, he is. We didn't talk about his age either. He is 36 years old. Like that's, you know,
Well, and
that's
he's got to be feeling 55 with how much he was cutting.
yeah, especially at the smaller weights, like 36 as a bantamweight and 36 as a heavyweight, two completely
Yeah.
different things.
You're in your
Like,
fight prime as 36 as a
yeah,
heavyweight.
yeah. So like I still think he's got a couple good years left. I just don't know if it's going to be enough to beat some of these younger and frankly I think more talented bantamweights than him.
Yeah. If he was given another 2 inches of height by God, might be a different conversation. I think the height will be too much to overcome for him to be a title holder, but a title challenger and somebody who brings serious value to the division, I don't think that'll keep him back at all. And I think he's on his way this weekend.
Yeah, well, I hate to keep disrespecting Rob Font. I have picked him the last couple times he's fought, I'm pretty sure, but I definitely don't want to overlook him. This is the reason he will be the reason why this is a tough test for Davison. He's gonna go. I fully expect it to go 15 minutes. So shout out Rob Font just for being a dog. Now we'll get to the co-main event between Jalen Turner and Bobby Green. Tarantula taking this one on short notice because Dan Hooker pulled out. Um,
I think this fight is closer to opening the main card than to being the co-main. It is insane how much they like Jalen. I like Jalen too, but what are we doing?
Well, after Jalen fought Dan Hooker, because I've been super high on him for a while, but that Dan Hooker fight just that shifted how I feel about him. He lost to Gamrot, and I was, still kind of making excuses for him. There's no excuses after the Hooker fight. He, I wouldn't be surprised to see Bobby Green win this.
Dude, I'm predicting him to win.
That's where I'm going too. Like I think Bobby Green, that's you talk about the tough guys, certainly not the most talented.
No,
Bobby Green is
no.
not the most talented. Kelvin Gastelum is the most talented, but another just tough guy to get out of there. And when you take a guy like Jalen Turner, who's lost consecutive fights in a row, at some point that's going to take a toll on your mental too. And Bobby Green's mental is tier one.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, and think about the guys he's beat. I went ahead and pulled up his shirt dog just to be safe. He's on a 2-fight win streak against Grant Dawson, another guy that the UFC really wanted to be good. Tony
Main
Ferguson.
evented.
Yeah.
Main evented that.
Yeah. He took Grant Dawson's chin, beats Tony Ferguson. We have a bad streak where he headbutted Jared Gordon, loses to Drew Dober, loses to Islam, beats Ally Aquinta down in there, has gone to decision with some real valuable fighters. He is just not the guy that you put against Jalen Turner right now if you're trying to rebuild him into some kind of important figure in the UFC.
Especially with Turner taking this fight on short notice.
Yeah.
That's working against him too. And Jalen Turner is a big lightweight. I am not sure how that weight cut's going to affect him because he is big.
I'm not sure that he's going to make it.
That's what I'm thinking. But
okay,
if he does,
yeah, in the cage, it might be a real Dan Hooker down at bantamweight or whatever it was. Feather. Where did he?
Yeah, when he got starched by Arnold Allen. Yep.
Yes. Yeah, it might be that kind of situation where he just looks unhealthy out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, this fight, and maybe they're putting it up there to let him get more time to get fluids in his body. I don't know, but it's not the right place on the card. It's not the right opponent to rebuild Jalen Turner. There is nothing about this that feels correct to me. I think we get a Bobby Green KO of Jalen Turner.
That wouldn't shock me. I don't know if I'm confident enough in a KO. I'll go decision with Bobby Green, but I think it could be a 30-27 possibly.
So, question. If Jalen loses 3 in a row, his record will be 13-8. What does the UFC do with him?
Well, at this point, Bobby Green isn't ranked from what I understand. Maybe he's like 15 or something. But then you put him up against you put Turner up against like Clay Guida, actually, to go back to a guy who's fighting on this card. If he can't put Clay Guida out of there, if you can't pick up a win against that guy, the UFC isn't for you.
Go have fun in the new PFL-Bellator merger.
Yeah. And maybe that'll rejuvenate his career. Maybe a new that's I've been so high on him because it feels like he is super talented. It feels like he has all the tools there. And, as I mentioned before, he is big. He's a 6'1" lightweight. Like that's a huge advantage. He's got good reach. Like it feels like all the tools are there. He just hasn't put it together. And maybe a change of scenery will do that. But coming off 2 losses against a guy like Bobby Green, it feels like a recipe for disaster.
I think he'll end up kind of being the Zach Wilson of the UFC. We all remember that pro day whenever he threw across his body 65 yards or whatever it was, and all of the scouts collectively drooled a puddle big enough to flood New York City. And then he got to the NFL and it didn't look as good. It's not practicing without pads and throwing crossbody. He's in dangerous territory to kind of become one of those guys that look great at the combine. On paper, he looks like he could be a champion, but then you put it out there and it's just not. And a third loss could have some real tough, ramifications on his confidence levels. And I think if he does lose this fight, I wouldn't even give him another one. I think for his sake, he should probably go to a new company and try to straighten everything out.
Yeah, that's just such a tough one because he is talented enough to be in the UFC.
Yes,
He is,
he's
but
talented enough to be a
it's
top
a
five
Darren
guy.
Till situation actually.
Yeah,
That's a pretty good way to compare it. Darren Till did that, so maybe that will work for him. But
or Sage Northcutt,
yeah,
Super
seriously,
Sage.
that's a great one.
Because I was trying to think of a guy because Till did actually pick up some huge wins, but Super Sage had the machine blown behind him and never got
Hmm.
there.
Yeah,
Jalen, similar situation.
no, that's a great comparison. But we'll get to our main event now
Yep.
between Beneil Dariush and Arman Sarukian. Uh, you tell me what you think first. I want to hear what you think.
Okay. I think this is going to be a really skillful fight. I think it's going to be a pretty fight to watch because I think both of these guys are pretty well put together. I don't know that it's going to be the most aggressive thing on the world, but Arman, he's had his struggles, but he recovers. Whenever he takes a loss, he gets right back on the horse, picks up these wins. I think Beneil, the way he was moving through the company at a speed where we thought he could be competing for a title, um, and then now he's lost. I think so much of his trajectory had a lot of momentum pushing it. Not to say he's not talented, not to say he's not capable of being up there, but I don't know that it's going to be as easy for him to get everything back in order like Arman has. So I lean Arman to win this as a kind of a statement victory. I think it'll be a decision, but as kind of a finally clearing the hurdle and being like, look, I'm here. Like I'm beating guys that matter. Let's give me more of them. Let's push me up this card. Let's see how high I can go.
See, the thing about Beneil's loss, though, that you didn't mention is that it was to Charles Oliveira,
Yes.
who is the clear-cut second best lightweight on the planet right now.
So I don't know if I want to say clear cut. I know.
Who fills that gap for you right now?
And there's really not. Like I'm willing to say that Charles is probably number 2 right now. I'm okay with that. But in what has it been 2 years since we've seen him fight anybody not named Beneil or Islam?
He fought Gaethje before he fought Islam.
I know, but I'm saying like since he's lost, we've seen
Oh, he's
those
only
two
fought
fights.
Beneil. Yeah.
Exactly. We haven't really seen him in how this division, because it has changed a lot, even in that year. We haven't really seen him deal with some of these outside forces like an Arman Sarukian. And now, not to say he's number 2 right now, but he hasn't dealt with Justin Gaethje after he's started figuring some more stuff out, and he looks like he could be right back up there for a title. Like there's just guys out there that I think could give him a run for his money. And obviously, a loss to Charles is not some dark omen on your career. He's very, very good, but I don't know. I don't know if it's the right. I don't know if how fast he lost and how pretty comfortably Charles looked better than him bodes well for what's to come.
Well, I still think Beneil is really good.
I do too.
I think Beneil is pretty underrated, and I think Arman. I used to like him a lot. I think he's become kind of overrated. Like I Beneil is when I check the line over a 2-1 underdog, and I think that's criminal.
Yeah, that's insane.
I think people are so undervaluing what he brings to the table, especially in jiu-jitsu. And I think that got lost in the Charles Oliveira fight because Charles is the standard of Brazilian jiu-jitsu these days, I would say.
Yeah,
Beneil is really, really good. And I think Sarukian is kind of squeaked out of some fights that he probably shouldn't have, or that he should have had an easier time with. You look at the fight math, but you look at the common opponent in Gamrot. Beneil made him look not great, to say the least. We still talk about that
Yes.
about that shot. Like,
that is a top 5 most referenced thing on our podcast.
yeah, 100%, 100%. But it's a fair thing to bring up in this scenario, So I just, God, I think Beneil is being severely disrespected, and I think people are giving Sarukian too much credit for. I don't think as impressive of a UFC run is kind of people expected him to have.
He's definitely not lived up to what was sold, but I still think that that's in there, and he at minimum shows resiliency because he does manage to get through fights as he's trying to build up his confidence from losing, because he was not supposed to be a guy that loses. Like they thought that he could be an undefeated type of champion, come in, take over. He works through it and he gets past it. And I think with age on his side, I don't know that I like his hands more, but I guess I trust his hands more on a nightly basis than I would Beneil's. Obviously, Beneil's ground game is incredible, but I just there's enough to it to where it might be more physical ability and more where their body is at, to where Arman might get that advantage. But no, I'm not trying to take anything away from Beneil. I'm just saying that where the way his career was going was a very momentum driven thing. And losing that momentum might be a little bit more detrimental.
That's true. I have a hard time seeing Sarukian give him problems, and he might win. He might. I just think the way Beneil's fighting style matches up particularly well with a guy like Sarukian.
I wish, because you brought it up earlier, Beneil is, you said, a 2-1 underdog.
Yes, somewhere around there in that field.
I wish that there was an option to cover for fighters. Like, I don't think they'll win, but I think they'll at least get the judges to score one round for them. Like they would have won one round on the judges' scorecards. I wish there was a way to set a cover.
That would be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
That would be kind of interesting.
I'm sure the books would hate it to have to keep track of that, but that would be a fun little option of, hey, I don't think that Beneil's going to win, but I do think he's going to at least get one round on these scorecards or whatever.
Yeah. I imagine it probably will go to the scorecards though, this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. 25 minutes of this though could be very, very cool.
Oh, super fun because both guys are like, there's no glaring weakness. Obviously, I think where you're going to see the advantages is, like you said before, Sarukian on the feet, Beneil on the ground. But both guys are good enough at those other things to where it's not going to be a, definitive advantage.
Right. It won't be a situation where Sarukian will just stand up from the ground, or Beneil will sit there and just skate around trying to get his ankles the whole fight. It's going to be a pretty free-flowing thing. It's going to be an entertaining fight, and I'm excited to see how it all unfolds. But Alex, next week, how can they come back, check us out again, make sure that they don't miss any of our episodes?
We are on YouTube. Subscribe to that. We're on Apple Podcasts. I think you can subscribe to that, and we're on Spotify. You can subscribe on Spotify, right?
Yeah, Spotify is follow, but it's
follow, subscribe, same thing. I have Apple, so I don't know. I guess I don't know enough about either. But
it's perfect because I post to Spotify, and I am the Spotify user of this. You're the Apple guy on both accounts, and then I handle the YouTube.
But one last thing, follow us on Twitter.
Yep.
Alex Eisman, KGWN. That's Jackson. It's Jackson TM.
There you go.
Gotcha. We got another fight night coming up next week. Obviously, it's hard to not look ahead to UFC 296 because that card is fire. That'll be in 2 weeks, but not a bad one in between. We'll be back again next week. We'll see you soon.
Yep. See you.